Welcome to Rapid Harmony. I'm Kyle Emanuel Brown. This is a space for high-achieving souls who want more than outcomes. You want resonance, you want truth, you want a life that moves with purpose instead of pressure. Here, we explore success with the soul and direction with depth. We slow things down just enough to hear your own wisdom again. We breathe, we question, we remember the part of you that never needed permission to leave. Every conversation is an invitation to trust yourself more than the noise around you, and live from that clarity that rises when you stop forcing and start listening. Take a breath, settle in, let's begin. If your body could say one sentence to humanity right now, what would it be?
That is an excellent question. I think it would say, please ask your body questions. I think that's one of the things that we have forgotten how to do. We've forgotten how to trust ourselves and how to listen to our body and have a relationship with it and trust it.
Because most people don't realize the body is the subconscious mind.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we can go down rabbit holes early, but really your perception is the projection of your reality, and your body's a part of that.
That's right. Well, want to welcome everybody listening today to Rapid Harmony. It's where consciousness and performance meet. And what we're going to be exploring today is pretty cool. So we're going to be exploring what it means to speak the language of your cells and how your body is this living conversation between chemistry and consciousness. I've got a pretty special guest here for you all today. This is Dr. Christine Smith. She is a functional medicine doctor. She is a nervous system specialist, and she's just a pure badass. Absolute badass. It's the way I always describe it. Like, man, this woman is just power. And nobody can tell what that brain is doing just by saying hello to you until you respond after hello. Well, I'm excited to have you here, and I want to drop into some stuff that's a little unique. You know, one thing that you and I share is this love and passion for holism. And most people think, well, holism means I nitpick a couple different things that sound cool off of Instagram, right? They'll be like, well, I'm into holism. I do yoga and I eat healthy and I watch some videos and I say namaste, and that's holism. How would you define holism?
Ooh. I consider it, for me, when I'm doing holistic care, the physical body, the mental body, the chemical body. And to me, the mental body also includes kind of our energetic body and our spiritual selves, right? So it's like, what are you doing with the quantum computer that sits in your head? Because research has basically now theorized that our brain works in 11 dimensions. So when we think about the holistic self, we have to take care of the physical body, the vehicle, and we have to take care of the chemical body, which is things like functional medicine, nutrition, what's going into your body, what is your body toxified by, what is it blocked by. And then we also have to take care of the mental and energetic body, which I think is one of the things that's hugely missing from our healthcare system. Like I have a great appreciation for therapies and therapists and psychology, but sometimes we'll miss the energetic component. And that's a lot of the subconscious work that I do. And I was actually just working with someone on this yesterday, and she's gone through a whole bunch of stuff, and she had a personality assessment about it, and it really stressed her out because it was all these questions about her past and her history and all the things that bring up the story for her. And we ended up just doing a session where I kind of did a guided meditation with her, and it came up that like her heart was hurting, right? And so we just had the heart as like a character in this meditation, and we were having a conversation with it and figuring out what we could do in her imagination to help the heart heal. And at the end of that session, after we ended up working with a couple different parts of her, she commented that she felt better from that than all the other stuff that she'd been doing. And that's how we move energy. And so I was talking to her about moving energy and moving story are very different things. And the brain has multiple layers that we have to work with. So if we're just talking about the mental component and like the energetic component, but we tie it to the physical body and the brain, we have the brain stem, and that's more connected to the physical body. And you can do touch-based techniques to really help with that. We have our limbic brain, that's the emotional brain. So that's what she and I were kind of working on. And then you have the neocortex, which is where you think through problems. So we really have to address all these different layers to have a holistic approach to things, because when we do, we realize that we're all just a reflection of everything. So when you are having bad emotional boundaries and leakiness in your emotional boundaries, you tend to get leakiness in your gut barrier and your epithelial tissues, and you get leakiness in the boundaries of your body. So it's really just a hologram and a reflection of everything else.
Love it. Love it. And it is such a beautiful way to look at the comprehensiveness and also the necessity for a custom bespoke way of looking at things, you know.
Yes.
One thing that I know you and I dig into a lot is the idea of biochemical individuality. And I would say it's such a huge piece of your wheelhouse. Can you explain a little bit more about what biochemical individuality really is, and also how hard that is to sell on social media?
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting question. Simply said, one size does not fit all. And that is pretty counterintuitive to our current medical system.
Right.
And when you realize that everyone's chemistry is quite unique, especially when you run labs, like I look at it all the time. And when you run labs and you realize how different everybody is, like you can have two people with the same symptoms and completely different mechanisms of what's going on, and they need different things. And so this can mean that, like, yes, you have a genetic blueprint that maybe lines you up for something and makes you more susceptible to something, and it might play a role in your individuality, but it really depends on what's going on in your life and how you're responding to the environment and what your early life primed you for. So you can have two people with the same genetics, and they may go through totally different experiences in their life, and then they actually need different things later. And that's shown in like tons of twin studies and everything. So the biochemical individuality is not only what you're born with, but also what goes on in your life and how you respond to things. And then that changes your needs of different kinds of nutrition, different kinds of supplementation, different kinds of exercise, different kinds of meditation. And I think that in itself is a unique component and can vary from person to person. And that's why different healing modalities can work for different people, and why one thing might not work for someone when it does work for somebody else. It just depends on where they're at and what they need at that time. So your biochemical individuality can vary person to person, and it can also vary at different times in your life.
I love it. And I like to say that one size fits all kind of only works in sweatpants.
Yep. I think that's good.
Right. And again, it's why almost any protocol, when you just stop poisoning yourself, works in the short term, right? Like, I went vegan, I feel amazing. I went carnivore, I feel amazing. It's a relative to poisoning yourself. Not poisoning yourself is going to work great. Like, that's the one dietary standard that works all. Well, I want to get a little bit more, not just into nutritional theory, but your own journey around this, because this level of depth and comprehensiveness in protocol is not normal. It's not like, hey, well, what school did you go to? You're like, all of them. So I want to know what moment you got to the point of realizing that healing had to go deeper than just labs and protocols.
When they were making me worse.
Expand on that.
I had a bunch of highly intelligent practitioners with like 12 different acronyms after their name, all working on my case. And everything was just making me worse. And my body was just rejecting everything. And at the time, and I've talked about this before, but I talked to people about the concept of allostatic load. That's when your body is overwhelmed. And those three modalities I talked about at the beginning that make up holistic care, physical, chemical, mental, that's what fills your bucket, your capacity bucket. Mm-hmm. And we were even talking about this earlier today at a different time. And it's like, if you have emotional capacity filling your bucket, then you don't have as much resiliency for a car accident or for eating bad foods. And at that time, I was going through a lot. I had physical injuries. I was going through emotional stressors, and then all of a sudden I got a mold exposure, and the chemical exposure just like threw me over the edge on top of the emotional pressures, and my body just started rejecting everything. And it kind of went into this state where it just didn't trust anything. And that meant that as a functional medicine practitioner, I was allergic to supplements. the irony of that was painful for me.
Ah.
And that is why supplements were making me worse, is my emotional body was just kind of rejecting it all. And my body was overwhelmed with everything. At the time that we were working with supplements, I didn't know that I had had a mold exposure. And so it was actually just like moving the poison around my body.
Wow.
And because I was on a big detox protocol and there is such a thing as like over supplementing, right? Sometimes you do need those at the right time. But it's very much about timing. And so I got a very palpable lesson in listening to the body and timing because nothing was working. And so I just decided to stop everything. And at that time, I was also pretty much allergic to food. I'd lost like 1/5 of my body weight. I couldn't remember a phone number. Like my brain wasn't functioning. It was really scary. I got a little taste of what it's like to stand in front of your fridge and not know why you're there. It's a scary thing. So for anyone who has someone in your life going through something like that, like hold some extra space for them because it's a really weird reality. When you remember that your brain is also your projector of reality, when your brain is not functioning, it means that you're literally not really living in the same reality as other people.
Wow.
And that is like a huge thing. And then the people on the other side of the reality, they don't really understand that. I was talking to a teenager who's been going through this recently, and it's kind of this feeling of like everybody wants you to be better and you want to be better. And then you feel like you've let them down if you're not better, but then you kind of skip through feeling your feelings and you have to feel the feelings. And there's a whole book about how emotions are actually molecules. And there's like an energetic component and a molecular component, but they can gunk up your system much like sand in a grandfather clock. So if you have all these emotions on the back burner that you're just like shoving down and not feeling, it's going to make it so that your cells actually can't function properly. And that was part of what was happening on top of mold exposure and all of this stuff. But in this experience, I realized that less was more. And so I started removing just any of the foods I was reacting to, listening to my body, asking it questions. I often talk about my body in the third person, which people get a little chuckle about, but it's because I developed this relationship with it where I was like, well, can we handle this today? Okay, not today. Well, what can we handle this today? Okay, we can do this. Can we handle it tomorrow? No, we can't handle it tomorrow. Okay. All right. I'm going to listen to that. And I ended up turning to one of the last tools I had left, which was meditation. I had studied Dr. Joe Dispenza's work like a decade ago and gotten really into it and then kind of fell off of it, which often happens to us in meditation. It's okay. But come back to your tools that have worked for you or that you've learned. And especially like practitioners, it's funny, we'll teach people tools and we forget to use our own tools. And so I came back to that tool and started really working with his meditations again. And I realized that I had to transform how my brain was perceiving the world. And I had to transform my perception back to a place of trust, not only in myself, but in the universe. And that was a difficult thing to do at the time because trust means letting go of your story. And I found that my greatest lesson in it all was that the healing has much less to do with figuring out your story and so much more to do with remembering everything it made you forget, which is how to feel trust, how to feel peace, how to feel joy, how to be at ease. And when I came back to that place of feeling at ease, my body could come to a place of ease and my cells could come to a place of ease and my fascia could relax and my cells could open. And then they were able to detox the mold.
Yes.
But if someone's in a super tight state, you're not going to be able to get them to absorb nutrition or detox anything out of their cells. And it's all just going to go through them or make them worse. So I'm a big proponent of working on the nervous system first. And my background was actually cognitive neuroscience. And then for my doctorate, I decided to go to chiropractic school to study life force because I worked in hospitals and just decided it wasn't the right route for me as an individual because of what I wanted to study. And chiropractic studies like neurology and radiology and pathology, and you get the neurology of the entire body, like all the way down to your toes, and you understand all the mechanisms of that. And I love the foundation of it because it's about studying life force. And then I mixed that with working in research for cognitive neuroscience, and all of this started to blend together. And my studies were always about like, what can I do to get me to the next thing that will allow me to do the things I need to do to get to the next thing? Because as you learn more, you just discover like more and more gaps and the gaps that you want to fill. And so I am constantly filling the gaps and I'm constantly learning. I've kind of lost track of the number of certifications I have at this point, but it's just because a lot of them weren't for continuing education credits, which is like how you maintain your license. A lot of them were because I just wanted to learn it. And so I think as you learn those things, they start to come into your life in whatever way they're supposed to. And that's how all the subconscious techniques fell into my life. And I found, I was going to therapy, doing all the things, and I just wasn't getting to where I needed. But once I started doing the subconscious work and working with my energy and working with my experience rather than what reality was supposed to be, that's when stuff actually finally moved.
I love that. And yes, fellow lifelong learner here. I think it's one of the most important things that actually is one of the greatest anti-aging protocols is curiosity, and always finding ways to be excited about something new, and to walk into it without the hubris as a student who's excited. And a big part of your experience, to summarize it, was shedding. And I'm curious, what belief about the body did you have to let die in order to find the truth that you practice now?
That healing comes from outside of you. And I had my mind opened by so many different people and techniques. I actually went to Australia to go learn a technique. And the reason I snickered a little bit when you were saying shedding is part of the symptoms I was going through during this time was it was like from my nose all the way across my face, my neck, my chest, into my armpits, all of it was my skin was just peeling off. Oh. And that's all my lymph system, right? So my skin was making up for everything that was toxic in my body because my liver was overwhelmed. And that happened for like a couple of years until I figured out everything that was going on. And it was a really tough time. And when I was in Australia, this gal was muscle testing her way to a message that my body had for me through a technique called Psych K. And she like muscle tested to this book, to the page, to the paragraph. And it was like a Rumi book. And the first line in the paragraph was, "Do not fret, my child, for you are shedding lower vibrations." And it was like on the other side of the world with a bunch of strangers as my skin was like peeling off. And I was like, what just happened? And it just gave me so much more respect for the processes that we think are woo-woo.
Yeah.
And like when you open yourself to that stuff, especially if you've been stuck, like why not? Like if you've been stuck, why not open yourself to new ideas? And when I realized that everything outside of me was making me sicker, and it wasn't until I went inward and I reset my own programs and I learned how to place my trust again. I know like you and I have talked about trust, and I'll just say this, like, because for anybody listening, like I get it. Like when you've been through something tough, it's really hard to trust again. And I was like, well, if I can't trust myself to make the right decisions, and I can't always trust other people because they're allowed to prioritize themselves, and I can't trust the universe because the only constant is change, where can I place my trust? And the unshakable place I could place my trust was in my ability to figure it out and get back up.
Yes.
And when you go inward and you're like, okay, body, like you grew from nothing into this entire system. There's no possible way that we could ever fully understand that because we are from it. Why would I do anything other than place my trust in you and place my trust in your ability to heal? And that is what I tell people all the time. You are designed to heal.
It's beautiful. And all of that came from curiosity. I like to say curiosity killed the cat, right? But that's why they have 9 lives and we only have 1.
True.
we keep going.
Or if you're already dying a little bit, why not be curious?
Exactly. And I haven't met anyone who isn't dying a little bit every single day.
This is true.
So I'll stay curious. And I want to dig back into that conversation, and that conversation that you were having with yourself, with your higher self. And you described the body as a communication system. So what's the science behind that, and how do cells actually speak?
Ooh, that's a big rabbit hole.
I love rabbit holes. So let's dive in.
I was just talking to a good friend about this the other day, about how the way that we present the cell in biology and in textbooks is missing pieces. Like our cells communicate through hormones and stuff and chemicals, yes, the way that we think. They also communicate through our fascial system. And there's a whole book called The Fourth Phase of Water. And it talks about water entering into this like gel-like form. And when you actually study fascia, which in the cadaver lab, I used to work in one, we used to think that it was trash and we'd like throw it in the trash. Now we're thinking it's actually kind of a part of your nervous system we don't fully understand. And the fascia is everything that holds your organs in place in your abdomen. It is how you can run and you actually like propel yourself with your tissues. It is how like baseball players throw a ball that fast, right? That's not their muscles, that's their fascia, like reacting as an elastic system. And the fascia, when you're looking at it, it also can form like hollow tubes, and there can be liquids traveling through it. And it's a gel-like substance where when you move it splits like a spider web, and it can like split into all these different pieces. And so when we're doing this, that's why if I touch your foot under the table, you actually can like feel it through your whole system. Mm-hmm. And it is this way of your fascia responding immediately. And then if you really go into it, they're now theorizing that some proteins have the ability to quantum tunnel. And this is stuff that like we're researching, but we're still coming to understand quantum physics and stuff. So you can only understand it so much. But that means that your proteins can basically transport in your body immediately. That's why when you put something on your tongue, you can have an immediate systemic chemical reaction in a time that doesn't even match our science. Like they've shown that the reaction time that you have from like a thought to a muscle responding, or like a reaction time, is actually faster than the time that we've calculated that nerves conduct the signal, which means that it has to do with like your field and your energetic field as well. Mm-hmm. And so there's the energetic component to it, where it's like you can, if you're sitting in a room and your eyes are closed, you can kind of sense when someone walks in the room. And that's like your energetic field sensing. Right. Your cells are communicating, right? So there's like the energy component, there's like the fascial component, there's like the quantum component, there's the chemical component, and then there's also a light component. And this is called photobiomodulation. Mm-hmm. And it's the idea that our cells actually communicate through light in their own ways as well. And this is why like sunlight is so important for us. It actually starts to charge our cells. We actually have like almost like a battery component to us. So that's a long answer to a question. Many ways that could go, but in a complicated way, that's how our cells communicate.
I love it. And I think there's also a simplicity. And for those that find this stuff to be a little too woo, the analogy I like to give is if you walk into a room and two people had just been totally making out, you feel it, you know it, you sense it. You're like, something's been going on here. They could be sitting across from each other, not even looking at each other, but you just kind of feel it in your being. And if they've been fighting like crazy before you walked in, you walk in the room, whoa, what's going on in here? And we dismiss that, not thinking like, hey, there's some extra sensory stuff going on here. And that is quantumly related. There's an entanglement going on there. And part of the communication, I think one of the things that we, talk about nervous system regulation, right? As a big thing, it's becoming almost buzzword worthy right now. And everyone just thinks, okay, what's the Band-Aid? But I think there's a lot more to it than just getting to the Band-Aids. And one of those is, looking at what's the root cause. So I'm curious your thoughts on how stress or emotion can literally change your physiology.
Oh, instantaneously. I mean, think about when you're in the parking lot, someone almost backs into your car. Like all of a sudden your body's just like, whoop, and you go into this whole other state. Or, you get that email or whatever, and it tells you about something, and all of a sudden you just kind of like, you feel your emotions shift or shut off, or especially if you go into that state where you don't have emotions anymore, that's a dissociation state. And so like that kind of stress, it actually dissociates you from your body, and then your body can't respond correctly and your cells can't communicate correctly. And when you go into states like that, or you go into a state, like it's meant to be like, we can go into stress states short term, like when you're like an ER doctor and you're like in an acute situation or you're responding to something, but we're not supposed to be running from the tiger consistently. Right. And that's where a lot of people are stuck in our world, mostly because of our societal expectations on our level of production that we're supposed to be putting out. And we were just talking about texts at the beginning of this. Like there's no way that we can keep up with 400 texts a day on 19 different platforms. Oh, on top of the 10,000 emails, right? Like we have so many more expectations and stimulations than our grandparents did. It's just a different world now. And our biology is not designed for that. So a lot of people are living in this stress state because they're trying to keep up without making time to disconnect and unplug and allow themselves to kind of return to a state of balance and rest in their system. And this rest is where our body rebuilds. So if you're constantly in that state of, well, what's the next thing? Or like if you're the person where you sit down to meditate and you feel guilty for meditating because you have 8,000 things running through your head of what you should be doing instead because you think it's more important, you're the one that needs it more than anybody else, because your body cannot enter a repair state when you're thinking about all that stuff.
I love that. There's a saying says, if you can't meditate for 20 minutes a day, meditate for an hour.
So on point. And that's what happened to me in that whole healing journey, right? Like I was in that state where my mind was racing, and I would sit there and I would meditate, and then I would get up to go do something, and I was like, wait, no, sit back down, like you're meditating. And I'd go and I'd sit myself back down, and I had to do that a couple times until I just like sat still and my unconscious mind wasn't running me anymore. And this is the power of meditation, is it's really learning to run your mind and not let it run you. And when we can learn how to do that, like, again, our brain is a frequency emitter. We work in 11 different dimensions. That is how we create our reality and how we instruct our body and our chemistry. Mm-hmm. And so if you can learn to have control over that emitter, you can control the state that your body is in. But if you're in that state where you're super stressed out all the time, or you cannot quiet your brain, or if you are quiet, you feel guilty for being quiet, you are not going to enter a repair state. And we have to be able to go into a quiet, restful state for our body to heal. So this is why I think we're experiencing so much chronic disease. It's like, yeah, we have polypharmacy, and yeah, we have poison on our food, and that sucks, but our body can overcome a lot if you can actually allow it to enter a healing state. But if you have all of that on top of being stressed out all the time because you're looking at things that are really stuff we're not supposed to know. Like, we're only supposed to know what's going on, like our 200-person tribe. And right. Like, we're supposed to like kill a rabbit and hang out by the river and eat it with our friend and talk. And that's like most of our day. That's the actual human state. And so now we have so much going on. Like, if you can't enter that repair state, you inevitably end up in chronic disease because your body's been in a breakdown state for decades. So if you can allow your body to exit the breakdown state and enter the building state, which is not just sleeping, it's basically wakeful, intentional rest, like when you're laying on a beach and you feel your whole body just kind of like, but it doesn't have to be on a beach. It can be in your living room or your backyard or watching your kid play in the sand, and just like allowing yourself to be in the same state as your kid. That's where kids can actually be like transformative for people, and like healing them is, it's like they force you to slow down, and they force you to realize like that you're rushing them to tie their shoe. And it's like, no, just like let them tie their shoe and like be there with them, and let yourself be 5 minutes late without stressing out about it. Because if you're constantly running your life like that, your body won't enter that healing state.
I feel like people understand it at a surface level. If somebody is in a state like, they've just fallen in love and they're in that honeymoon state and they're walking around, you're like, you are glowing. What is going on with you? Or you have some new skincare routine. In reality, it's like their own body and physiology is creating these chemicals that are making them glow from the inside out. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. Like, there is this component of what is your mind focused on, right? And that when you're in that state, it's because you're focused on all the stuff that your stress made you forget. Mm-hmm. You're focused on how to be happy and how to be joyful and how to be positive about the future and how to feel enthusiastic about something. And when you feel those feelings, which is really what you can do in meditation, and that's a lot of like what Dr. Joe Dispenza's work is focused on. And like, there's a component to like, don't skip your shadow work, right? Like, you still got to process stuff, but really it's learning how to even feel those feelings again, so you can wire the neural pathways for it so that you can produce the chemistry that comes from it that is healing for your body. Because your body follows your mind. If you're imagining if those things had happened, you're going to have a chemistry response as if they'd happened. But it's about feeling it, and like feeling it as an emotion, and like not just thinking it. And you have to kind of learn how to relax into your body. And like, even on my way up here, I had like someone cut me off in traffic. And so I did a breathing exercise, and then I did kind of some vagal toning, which is where you just kind of hum a little bit. And it chilled my whole nervous system out. And it's a way that you can learn these small little tools that you can do throughout your day to regulate yourself. Or, yesterday I realized like I hadn't eaten and I had had caffeine, and that made my system like a little shaky. And so I just decided to lay back and listen to some gentle music for 5 minutes and kind of breathe and do that humming before my next patient call, because I wanted to be in the right state for that patient. And I also ate some food, right? And that's listening to my body. So I asked my body a question. I was like, body, what do you need right now? And it was like, I need meat, and I need to lay down, and I need no light. And I was like, okay. So I put on an eye mask and I ate some food and I laid down for 5 minutes and I hummed, and then I got on my call and I felt a lot better. And people can do this in their day. So like, even if you're at work and you're in your office, like, eat some lunch, lay on your back, listen to some music, turn off the light, do this for 5 to 10 minutes. You'll be ready to go for the rest of your day. And it's just, nobody does that anymore.
I love it. I think one of the biggest things people need to learn is the idea of you are not your body, and understand that you can either be really looking through the microscope too much, or you could be looking way through the telescope, which can be people who are, non-integrated from way too much psychedelics or partying or spiritual work or breath work, and they're completely disassociated. So finding that balance between the microscope and the telescope, I think, is imperative. How throughout the day do you usually recommend people get centered?
Well, we were just talking before about the difference between the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. We need both. We need both to survive. If you're too high in sympathetics, that's like running from the tiger, fight or flight. If you're too high in parasympathetics, that's like, I can't get out of bed. I don't care about anything. So you have to kind of find the balance of them. And when one is on, the other one kind of goes down, and then they can flip flop like this. So when you're in a hypersympathetic state and you're overstimulated, that is when you need to lay on the ground and rest for a second and let your system kind of balance and let the sympathetic come down. Fight or flight, come into rest and digest. Now, when you're feeling really tired, and like this is what we learn about in chiropractic school, right? It's like how to turn on different parts of the nervous system and like how to actually like orchestrate them like a conductor. It's quite cool. There's different parts of the body that you can touch that help emphasize this. But when you are too parasympathetic, you're too tired, then you can even do breath work for this, right? So if your inhale is longer than your exhale, you're going to wake yourself up. I'll do that when I'm falling asleep in a lecture or a meeting, and you just change your breathing slightly. When your exhale is longer than your inhale, that's going to turn your system down. So if you're feeling overstimulated and you have a long exhale, that's going to help to balance your system. And so, in the morning when you wake up, you can start inhaling a little bit longer than your exhale. You can turn your lights on bright. You can start playing some music. You can start giving yourself stimulation and input so you wake yourself up for your day. It doesn't always have to be coffee, right? Like you can do it with light. You can go for a walk and like look at the sun, and that'll actually like turn on your whole circadian rhythm for the day. And if you eat food instead of fasting and drinking coffee, especially if you're already depleted, then that is going to help not put you in an over sympathetic state. So you're not going to be hyperstimulated. And then if you need to start winding down at the end of the day, this is when you can start to turn the lights down. You can use like red light glasses. You can eat a little bit of food and then just let yourself quiet a little bit. Maybe like read a book, listen to some music. But this is why we say like try to not have screen time before bed, right? Because the screen time, even if your phone is on the red light, it's the notifications and the scrolling. They're all dopamine hits. And so it's waking your system up. So the dopamine is waking up the system at night, regardless of if they're dropping in and changing light frequency. Yes. Like you might have blue light blockers on that prevent your cortisol from getting as high. But if you're stimulating yourself with dopamine and rewards and actions and things you need to respond to, it's still going to wake your brain up. So I want to dig into some of these concepts of morning routines, night routines, but the practicality of a we consciousness, meaning for those listeners, high achievers who happen to have families all on different system scales, timelines, where you're like, okay, well, my bedtime routine starts at 9 and I need dead quiet and I go to sleep and everyone leave me alone. And then their kids say, no. And they're walking in, they're waking them up. They don't want to go to bed. They're not easy to fall asleep. Alarms are going off. Different things are going off. What's one thing that people can focus on within nighttime ritual that can universally be a good starting point? Let's start with when you pull into the driveway when you get back from work. Because I think this is a big one. And this is the whole like men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing. And women have the ability to flip state pretty quickly, just because their corpus callosum, the connection part of their brain, has like more fibers and they are able to kind of flip between those states. Men actually need like 5 to 10 minutes to be able to flip states. And so if you're coming home from work and you're about to go in and you want to be dad and you don't want to be CEO, then you might need to sit in the car for a second and like think about how grateful you are for these kiddos that show you how to slow your life down. And you do that for 5 minutes and you breathe in your car and then you go inside. And now you can be dad. And then you're already starting to flip your state. so that, when wifey's in there, she's not automatically asking you to do like 15 other things, because also if she's listening to this, she'll have an understanding that like you need some time to flip state, and she can also have her time of kind of focusing on herself depending on what she's doing. And you guys can do this exchange where it's like, maybe she takes care of something while you walk in and kind of flip your state, and then you take over kid duties so that she can go and like breathe for a second, or maybe take a shower, or do some like respond to something that she needs to respond to. So it can kind of be this shared thing. But one of the easy things that I often do for kiddos who are, overstimulated when they come back from school, just give them a hot pack. Like you can get them at the grocery store for like $15.
Yes.
You just get a hot packing, like put it around their neck or put it on their belly, and that'll immediately start to vagal tone them. So if you're feeling overstimulated when you get home, or there's like too many alarms going off, too many sounds, too many things, just a little hot pack can actually start to chill your whole system, or a hot cup of tea. So I like in my office, I often use the lights. I'll dim the lights. I'll use different color lights and different frequencies. And then you can also use heat. And if you heat the body up and then you take that off, and it starts to cool down because it's been hot, that coolness will help you sleep. And so you can also start to kind of like, as long as it's not too cold, right? Like within reason, but you open some of the windows and you start cooling your house down before you go to bed. But you're like walking around with this hot pack after you get back from work. It's like keeping you warm. It's helping you kind of chill out. And then as you start to go to bed, everything is cool and you can sleep really well because you're cool. So that's the same thing of people who like to take a bath. Like sometimes, I work with a lot of people in the office, and I'm often touching people, and there's like an energetic component to that. And so sometimes when I get back, I'll take a shower or I'll take a bath, because it's a way of just kind of like washing off the energy, or like cutting energetic ties. And, if you have kids and you don't have time for that, then the hot pack is an alternative.
Right. I love it. And my son loved that hot pack. He came into your office, remember that one time,
right.
And we heated it up, put it on, and it just totally helped with the nervous system regulation. And right now, a lot of these more magical kids or magical adults listening right now who are highly tapped in, highly sensitive to other people's energies, but don't know what to do with it. And so I want to double down a little bit more on something that you brought up, which is the cleansing of energies. And I feel like most people cleanse energies like, oh, only when it's ceremony and I'm doing something ceremonial, so now we burn some sage. And for me, all day long, I'm doing different things to cleanse others' energies. So because we are much more than just a physical body, and our intention is to get into harmony, what types of things would you recommend people do during a typical day to really align and cleanse stuff that really isn't theirs, both emotionally, mentally, and energetically?
Sure. So there's a couple ways to do it, but I think intention is the key to it all. So if you just have even the intention to do it, even for 30 seconds, that intention in itself is energy. So if you have the intention of, I choose to let this go, or I choose to create an energetic bubble around myself, and I'm going to use my imagination to give it a color and a design of what it might look like, and I'm just playing around in my imagination, all of a sudden you actually are working with energy, because that's really how it works. And if you're closed to that concept, and you're like, oh, that's not real, that won't work, then yeah, it won't work for you. So it's this component of being open to it, and then just being playful. And that's like what a lot of the subconscious techniques are about, and why they can work so well for people is because it's getting curious about, well, how can I shift this? So if you are about to, go into a meeting and you need to have like a little bit of a boundary, then you can imagine that you have this little force field that kind of goes out a little bit farther, and you just give yourself like a little bit of energetic protection, like a video game character, right? Like just imagine that you have like one of those force fields that you picked up as you were walking along. Or let's say now that you want to interact with somebody else, you can actually imagine that it's a little bit softer and flexible. You can still maintain it, but it can be like a little bit more flexible. And then I'll just share like one of my favorite things. I'll do this in between clients, and I think it's actually really important. An old mentor of mine taught me this, and you basically just give it to the earth. So you imagine your energy going downwards, and you go down to the molten core center of the earth, and you just imagine that like whatever you're holding, you put it down into that molten core center, and you just watch it kind of dissolve into the magma. And then if you need some energy, you pull it back up from the center of the earth. You pull it up through your feet, your legs, into your body. You feel it kind of spread all the way to your fingertips. And you just kind of like did a 20-second little cleanse for yourself. And the earth is always there. She's not going anywhere. She can hold whatever you need. And so just being able to tap into that, and even knowing that that's an option, I teach people that as a little meditation often, but when I'm in between clients, even as I'm like walking them to the door, I will, with each step, imagine that their energy is kind of going down and I'm releasing it and I'm creating space for the next person. And then as I open the door, the next person walks in. Now I have new, fresh energy for them. And if I just did something like energetic work with someone, I'll be like, okay, I'll meet you in there in a sec. I'm just going to use the restroom. Sometimes I don't even need to. I just go in and I wash my hands.
Right.
And it's like that washing of the hands is like I'm cleansing myself of that energy.
Ancient wisdom is the understanding of the power of the elements, and all of these elements are incredibly cleansing. Fire, earth, air, water, the ether, all of it is incredibly
we forget
powerful.
to do that.
Yeah, and water is incredible, right? We don't understand how powerful water is until we see it as a gigantic wave, but we don't also understand that it can make a complete transformation in just a tiny little bit of time by washing our hands.
Well, we are made of water.
Right.
So it's really just working with our own element in a way. And a client that I worked with the other day when we were working on her heart, in part of the meditation, she was wanting to kind of give something to the wind and like let the higher universe and like let the wind take it. This is all in the imagination, right? You can do this just in your imagination. And she ended up going outside afterwards and it was a little bit windy. And I just had her like bundle up and get like a cup of tea and sit there and just feel the wind and just kind of like let the wind do its work and let the wind just kind of cleanse and blow like anything else that it needed to kind of cleanse out of her system, anything else that she needed to give, any little fine tuning, any little bits that were left. And then, another thing that I do fairly often, I just do like little fire ceremonies. I just have this like teeny tiny little fire pit for my porch. And I'll just like write down stuff I want to let go of and stuff I want to bring in on a piece of paper. And I just light it on fire, I put it in the fire pit and I watch it burn. And it's like you can like burn your intentions in that way. And I've had people comment before where, they think that's like witchy or something. I'm like, well, not really. Like, it's just like what we used to do as a tribe. Like we used to just like sit around and watch the fire and tell stories. And I came across this thing the other day. This was cool. It was, I can't remember what the population was, but it was one of the populations in the world that's a little bit more tribal. And they're recorded as having the lowest levels of any kind of depression or apathy in the world. And one of the things that they do is they sit around the fire at night and children tell their stresses from the day to the fire and to the parents. And the parents just hold space and they just let the stresses come out and they let the fire transmute it. They call it like cleansing before bed. And then they go to bed and they wake up the next day. So it's like, instead of telling your kids to like not focus on the negative, it's like you let them let it out in a way where you can help them transmute it in a safe place. And then all of a sudden they don't have that in them anymore. And this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of like being able to move energy and move emotions through you. So that's not gunking up your cells.
Well, I like to say it's better to throw our frustration with Tom into the fire than throw Tom into the fire. So
I like that.
It's a pretty good way of looking at it. And in indigenous cultures, there's also a concept called frog medicine that Soaring Blue Eagle had shown me this, which is frogs at the end of the night are making all that ribbiting noise, and they're just letting it all out. Boss is pissing me off, had a hard day, wife forgot to cook the meal, it's over. It just lets it all out, and then clunk, 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 they're jumping into the water. And then you don't hear the frogs at night because they're at peace. They got it all out. And that is something that we can do, putting our hands underneath the water, speak it all out, either in our heads or out loud, and it's amazing how much better you sleep at night with that.
Well, I think a good practice to do the other side of that is you can like do that in the evening, and then you kind of clear yourself for the night. And then when you wake up, think of like 5 to 10 things you're grateful for. And then that's the other end of it.
It is amazing how people think things like gratitude are ridiculous, as well as visualization and creative imagination. And I always like to get back to, where did that stem from? And in most cases, that stemmed from their own childhood, where it got stifled. It was like, okay, we're not in kindergarten anymore. And we hit a particular age, and that age could be, okay, we're now going into middle school. So now we got to get serious. And I think that's one of the biggest flaws of all time, because what do most of the greatest athletes, celebrities, actors do to reach the top? Creative imagination. They believe in themselves at a level that is unrecognizable. And I usually like to ask people when they're going through that process, you're doing this all day long, but do you realize you're doing this in the opposite way, through worry and manifestation of worst case scenario. So when that comes down to talking to your cells, what do you believe happens to your cells when you're doing this constant manifestation of worst case scenario?
Stop calling it your bad knee. Don't call it your bad back. Call it your knee that needs more love and the back that took all your football injuries.
Yeah.
Like, have a different conversation with your body, and don't use the language of, I'm going to use sunscreen because I don't want to get cancer. Say, I am going to use really healthy, non-toxic sunscreen to protect my beautiful, perfect skin. Right? There's like a whole different way of looking at it. When I started having the conversation with my knee that needs more love, because I put it through a ton with sports and everything, and falls and dislocations, and it's been through a lot. It made it so that I wasn't angry and like seething at my body. And I think so many people are stuck in this place where they're like seething about something and they just push it to the back of their mind. That inevitably manifests as some kind of dis-ease in the body. And over time, it becomes disease in the body. And so I think when you're in this state of being angry, being frustrated, like your cells listen to that and your immune system listens to that. And if you're in a place where you're like constantly suppressing your voice, there's a component of like autoimmunity to that, right? Like Gabor Mate, who is an MD and like one of the fathers of understanding trauma, wrote a whole book about it called When the Body Says No. And there's another book called The Body Bears the Burden. And it's all these books about how your body stores this stuff. It's stored in your fascia, literally. This is why body work is so important. So if you've been in stressful events, or you've been in police or military or any of these things, or you've been in a situation that has been triggering for your nervous system, that's stored in your fascia. So when you start to get body work, it starts to release out of your system, and you're actually like preventing disease later in life because you're allowing your body to energetically process something that's been stuck. And this is why sometimes I'll do body work on people and they'll like start sweating or they'll start crying and they like have no idea why. I was working on a gal and she was in military and she had these 2 spots in her shoulder that were just like, we ended up doing some body work and some dry needling for it and like releasing the scar tissue, and she started sweating and her eyes started leaking. She's like, I don't know, like I'm not crying, it's just like my body is leaking right now. And I asked her, I was like, well, these spots, what were they? And she's like, oh, that's where I kept my gun. That's where I slung my gun. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And so as we released those spots, she had this whole like systemic physiological release from her cells, which is pretty cool.
I think a lot of that relates to so much of the research that we're coming into awareness around fascia right now. And you said in the beginning that, oh yeah, we used to just think it was junk and we'd throw it away. And one of the things when it comes down to the body and the cells that, again, take the religion and spirituality out of it for a minute, which I think is impossible, but let's just say we're taking anything spiritual out of it and we're just looking through the scientific lens. The hypothesis of anything being junk or being born with, oh, this is just junk, this was broken. I think the question we all need to ask ourselves when we're talking to ourselves is, where did we learn that any part of us has no purpose, has no meaning, was born broken? And a lot of times you'll say, well, that's either the conditioning of the parents, it's the religious institution that looked at that little baby and said, oh, you horrible little baby, you were born broken. Like, there is nothing junk within us. This is an incredible, magnificent scientific machine that is energy slowed down to the density of human experience. And that to me is this beautiful intertwine of science and spirituality that's happening right now. So I love your awareness that, hey, this fascia is intelligence and it's like plasma right now. And for those that are going down that, openness to what plasma and that energy is, can you give a little bit of an understanding of plasma, fascia, and kind of how all of this stuff may interrelate?
Can you expand what you mean when you say plasma?
Well, there's the plasma that is in our body, and then there's the plasma that is now we're like, I was just running a UFO tour out in Sedona, right? went to somebody, I said, all right, I want to go with somebody who full-time for 45 years, her full-time job is UFO tours. And we were sitting there, and all of a sudden, she had mentioned that there's this plasma-like consciousness that has been floating around Sedona for that past week. Maybe we'll get to see it. And before we put on the military grade binoculars, and we were about 50-50 left brain skeptics and right brain dreamers in the community. And all of a sudden that thing just happened to fly over our heads. And we looked up and she goes, that's like a plasma-like substance. And to me, all of it is just another form of consciousness, just like our body and our cells, that everything around us has consciousness in it.
Okay, thank you. That ties this back nicely to what you were talking about a moment ago. So you were talking about no part of us is junk.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it hilarious that we've called junk DNA.
Right.
Yeah. No, like they're now theorizing that our DNA is actually basically a frequency antenna for us to be able to interact with quantum reality. Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. So we called it junk DNA, but really it was I don't know what it does DNA.
Yes.
And so there's that. And then I want to come back to what you're talking about of like projections of something being wrong with you, because I think this is actually an important thing for people to address and know. Guilt is the concept of I've done something wrong. Shame is the concept of I am wrong. Shame is usually projected on you by somebody else. And it often happens early in life. And a lot of people are afraid of their shame. And that's why they like don't do their shadow work. And when I talk shadow work, it's like looking at the things that you're so incongruent with that you don't even believe they could be a part of you. But when you start doing that work, that's truly how you evolve yourself and how you get rid of other people's projections so that you can find out who you actually are.
That's right.
And this all ties into this like hologram that we're talking about. And you're talking about like the plasma of the universe, the plasma of the cells. So plasma is kind of like so I was asking what it meant to you, right? Because it can mean like a couple different things. But it's like, let's just call it the hologram, right? It's the hologram that kind of makes up everything and is the mirror of everything back and forth. And your cells respond to this and they are in it. And I had this teacher that I liked. He'd been in practice 52 years. And as a student, I was struggling. Like, who would have thought that I would have been studying like quantum physics in chiropractic school? I don't know. But like to understand energy, you really have to study it.
That's
and
right.
I always say to understand biology, you have to understand chemistry. To understand chemistry, you have to understand physics. To understand physics, you have to understand quantum physics. And to understand quantum physics, which you really can't, you have to understand energy. And we were talking about Newtonian physics and quantum physics. And they counter each other. And this is where people struggle, right? And it's like, well, that can't happen if, this is here. And like, how's that made of energy? He says, oh, well, quantum physics is just a larger model that fits Newtonian physics under it. So Newtonian physics is a part of quantum physics. And that's how you can have multiple realities. And Carl Jung, one of my favorite quotes is, the only thing that comes close to explaining the fullness of life is the paradox. And the paradox is that you can have two realities that are counter to each other and they can both be right. And then there's all this science going on that says like time isn't linear and stuff. And then you tie that into like looking for aliens and like, do they even work on our timeline kind of thing? And like, is your timeline actually affected by your perception? So when we start to tie into this like plasma of the universe, because when you look at nebula and galaxies, they really just look like a giant neuron.
Yep.
Which I find fascinating, right? Everything macro is just a mirror of micro.
Right.
And I've always loved that concept. And like a cell is just like a miniature city within a giant city. And then that body is in another city. And it's just like all these stacking concepts. But I think that's how all of this ties together. And when you can tap into this realization that we are not separate and we are all part of this like plasma together, and your cells are a part of this like plasma in your body, and the fascia is like a different expression of it in this like gel web-like form that can change. Because that book, The Fourth Phase of Water, it also talks about kind of how like proteins actually work in the cells. And like, yes, we have like the mechanisms that are laid out in like our cellular physiology textbooks, which have changed substantially in the last 50 years, by the way. If you look at old textbooks, there's like different ideas and different thoughts. We've known about quantum physics since like the 30s. We've been studying it for a long time. And if you look at this, it actually like the way that the water molecules change with energy and it enters this fourth phase, which is not solid, not liquid, not gas, but kind of gel, that can change between the states, and that changes the edges of the cell, and it'll like open and close the channels rather than it being like just a straight pump. It kind of depends on like what channel you're talking about and stuff, but there is like a component of that. So that's a very deep question. There's so many different ways to talk about it, but it's like, if you can understand the interconnectedness of it all, it starts to actually alter like how your physiology is working also, because that trust starts to come back in. Which is a huge thing you've been talking about lately, is this concept of trust. And I think if you can tap into the concept of trust, not just of the universe, but of yourself and of your body, that is the healing mechanism. That is where your cells get the correct signal to know what to do, because you can give them all the right molecules and all the right things. You can put someone on a detox protocol, but if the signal from the brain is, we are in danger, nothing will save us, like nothing's going to work, it won't work, because the signal's wrong.
That's right. And that's what creates the safety, is the bottom of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, is you could be literally living in the most incredible mansion, totally isolated from everything, with all the food, everything that could take you to the level where you should think, all I need to be thinking about is self-actualization right now. But you don't trust yourself right now. You're completely at war, and you're in a state that's hell that's in your mind.
Yes.
So the antithesis of that is if you take all that complexity and bring it down into the embodiment, which to me is one of the most important pieces, which is at the base of all real wealth, which is harmony. And I'm curious, what does harmony mean to you if you were to wrap it up in a bow in one sentence?
Adaptation. We have to be able to adapt to our environment. So if you're in the city and you're driving, you better be in Newtonian physics reality, because that car is going to hit you if you're not going to move in the right way. But if you're in the middle of the jungle and you're trying to like meet your soul, you might want to let go of that Newtonian physics and kind of open to the stuff to be curious about and that you might not know yet, and that might expand you. And then you'll achieve what you're looking for. And so I think that adaptation and being able to move between them, that is finding harmony in life. And that goes back to the whole nervous system thing we were talking about, of sympathetic versus parasympathetic. It goes to why certain types of body work for some people and another type works for a different person, or medicine works for someone and doesn't work for somebody else. And it's like being able to adapt between these states. And when something isn't working, getting curious and trying something else and playing around a little bit and like bringing some playfulness back into it. I think a lot of us have just like forgotten how to be playful in our lives.
I love it. And for me, getting out of your head and into your heart is the ultimate way to get playful again. And thank you for taking the time today. This was a blast. It was super fun. And I'm the fortunate guy that gets to come see you on a regular basis. So it's amazing. But for those that don't live here locally, are tuning in and are fascinated with learning from you and connecting with you, what's the best way?
Sure. Well, first off, it's an honor. Thank you. I tell all of my clients it's an honor to work with them and to hold safe space. I get to hold space for some really cool people, and especially some big people that don't always have people holding space for them. And so it truly is an honor. And for those who are curious or who want to learn more, I've actually started an entire community called Wellness Evolution Community. You can just go to wellnessevolutioncommunity.com or go to YouTube, and same title. And it is a community to teach people this stuff and to remind them how their physiology works and how their body works and how it's designed to heal, and to bring trust back in their lives and bring cool people like yourself in to talk about those concepts so that they have community to heal. Because I think health and the health journey, even though we've tried to keep everything nice and private and keep all our information in a good place, which is a good thing, it's become insanely lonely. And it's really lonely, like between practitioner time, especially if you're struggling with a health issue. And so I designed that community to make it accessible, where you don't always have to be a part of some huge program. You can just kind of come hang out and listen to talks and ask questions. So that is a way that I have broadened this beyond my state, beyond the country. Like, it's going into other countries now. It's quite cool. I have had people from Europe and Australia, and it's growing. And that was the whole point, was to give people a like-minded community to be able to learn from and expand with, and But like, I also just teach you straight up physiology of like how your body works and how to heal. And so that's what I wanted for people, is to come there. And then you're also welcome to follow me on Instagram at Dr. Christine Smith. And that has, I'm always putting up, quick tips in 60 seconds. So if you're like, I'm not ready for community or anything, and like you only have a 20-second attention span right now, start there. And that's a place that you can just come and learn how your body works.
I love it. Start where you're at, tune in, listen to your body, and realize that patient can heal thyself. Very simple.
Food is medicine. Hippocrates said it long ago, and you are designed to heal. I'll keep saying it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, my friend, if this episode sparked something in you, don't just wander off into the abyss of the internet. Hit subscribe so you can actually get the good stuff when it drops. And if you're feeling generous or mildly enlightened, leave some love in a review. It takes just 30 seconds, and somehow it feeds the algorithm gods so they notice and more people who really need it. Now, if you want to step deeper into my world, rapidharmony.com is where the real magic lives. Coaching, community, rituals, and a few surprises that are way better than just scrolling around another motivational reel and not doing anything about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being you. And remember, your inner harmony isn't hiding. It's just waiting for you to pay attention. I'll see you on the next episode. Now go subscribe before you forget.